The body, desire, and sexuality. The topic for today's Soul Sovereignty and Sexuality podcast with myself, Jessica Falcon, international soul embodiment guide and relationship expert. It's a bit of a continuation from the past couple of podcast episodes, in which I started to talk about in episode 38, my journey into sacred feminine power. And in episode 39, I talked about what is the sacred feminine, because quite frankly, it is widely misunderstood. And when we're talking about the sacred feminine, from my perspective, which is a historical perspective, I've spent years studying religious history, ancient civilizations, and mythology to get to the root of unequal power dynamics and relationships, which also requires getting to the root of the suppression of the feminine, because they are inextricably linked. And from this historical perspective, the feminine, the reclamation of the feminine as sacred, is the reclamation of the body as holy, the self as sacred, the divine within the self, and the recognition of life itself as divine, because a split was created in our consciousness based on a belief system that, quite frankly, was imposed through a lot of war, violence, and oppression, that said that God only exists outside of the self, outside of the body, outside of earth. And because of this split in consciousness, we began to suppress our life force energy and suppress the body. And many spiritual traditions talk about coming up and out of the body as somehow more spiritual, as the right thing to do, to suppress the emotions, to suppress desire, to suppress our feelings and our inner experience, to suppress sexuality and sexual urges. And this is in many traditions called asceticism, which is denial of the body. And that the more you deny the body, the more you go into pure, quote, spirit outside of the body, the more evolved you are. Now, clearly, this is a more masculine approach. In some ways, we could call it connected to the divine masculine, in that these same spiritual traditions really highlighted the importance of being conscious of the spirit, being conscious of the divine, of developing meditation skills, which give us the ability to observe our thoughts and to separate ourselves from our feelings and thoughts and emotions and beliefs. Yet they are rooted in separation, in that it saw spirit as separate from matter. It saw spirit as separate from the body. It saw spirit as separate from our day-to-day lived experience. And so, as an international soul embodiment guide, this conversation is under the context of we reunify those things that we have seen as separate. We reunify soul and body. We reunify spirit and matter. And ultimately, we reunify the feminine with the masculine. And this is how we embody the soul, right? This is how we come into sacred union within, and ultimately sacred union without. It all happens within. And my own journey was really all about getting into the body and out of the head. We cannot come into the sacred feminine through the head. It's not about logic. It's not about ration. It's not about reason. It's not about thinking our way into spirituality. We don't simply think about how to feel ecstatic. We have to have an experience of ecstasy. If you're having sex and you are in your head, you're probably not enjoying the act very much. Not that I think sex is an act, but that's a whole different conversation. If you are feeling desire move through your body, if you're feeling life force energy move through your body, that's a very different experience than thinking that you want to feel alive. And as we start to come into the body, we have a lived experience of these things. And sometimes the hard part is that a lot of people don't even want to connect with the body because they feel so much shame inside. And this shame has been passed down for generations. I myself had to, as I started to connect with my body as something more than just a pure object, but to go into the body, to breathe into my womb, to breathe into my heart, to breathe into my core, to connect with the energy between my skin, which I talked more about in the last couple of episodes. I had to first face the ways that I was simply judging my body, demonizing my body, shaming my body, and stop seeing it as a purely physical object and start to see it as a compass, as a portal to the divine, as holding the wisdom and truth of my soul. But more than anything, going into the body helped me to connect to my own inner experience. And if we are to reclaim the feminine as sacred, and we are to reclaim the self as sacred, we have to face the belief that it is selfish to have a self. And we have to understand that it is only by knowing the self, the inner self, that we can actually access union, and that we can actually access the divine, truly, and have an embodied experience of the divine rather than a concept of the divine. What links all of this is the heart. I do not believe that we can truly go into the body to receive its wisdom and truth. We don't first activate the heart. And we cannot touch our true desires if we don't go into the heart. And we cannot experience what I would call sacred sexuality, or sexuality in which you feel deeply connected and seen and honored and valued, if you don't first go into the heart. The sacred feminine requires the heart to be open. The sacred feminine can even only be recognized as sacred when there's heart consciousness present. It's one thing to be conscious, we can call that divine masculine. It's another to be in your heart, have heart consciousness, which we can call the divine feminine. Love. Consciousness merged with love, in and through the heart. Because it is through the heart that we see and hear. It is through the heart that we commune and connect. You can refer to some past episodes on how to be heard or how to be seen in relationship, in which I talk more about that. But for the purpose of this today, if we're to reunify the body and soul, if we are to reunify spirit and matter, if we are to reunify masculine and feminine, if we are to reunify sacred and sexuality, holiness and desire, then we do that through heart consciousness, because the heart is the point of union. And we have been under the belief, the consciousness, that everything is separate. These are just beliefs. If you take nothing away from this conversation but this, these are all just beliefs. You could believe differently, but most of us believe this way and don't even realize we're believing this way, because it's so deeply embedded in the individual and collective psyche. But it shapes how you perceive the world. It shapes how you perceive yourself. It obviously shapes how you perceive the body. We would not hold shame over the body or how it looks or how it feels or its bodily functions or sex or any sexual fluids. We would not hold any shame over any of that if we were seeing it from the consciousness of the heart through that union consciousness as holy, as sacred, as one with the divine, as nothing separate from the divine. We cannot hold shame if we were holding the lens of the heart. It's impossible to hold the two at the same time. And so this reclamation of the feminine as sacred is first coming into the heart. That allows you to go into the body, that allows you to touch and feel and see what is inside of you, that allows you to receive your inner world, your inner experience, your inner fears, your inner doubts, your inner shame, your inner guilt, these things that you've absorbed, the things that you've adjusted and believed. It allows you to receive them with love so that you can then become aware, bring the consciousness of the heart to them, to transmute them, to heal them. We can't heal trauma, for example, without the heart being open and activated. Did an episode on that, what it takes to heal trauma. The heart is what has the power, is what creates the capacity to become one with something. We don't become one with something with our mind. So if you want to become one with the divine within you, you open your heart and you devote to this union. And you allow your heart, you allow your soul's truth to reunify you, to bring you back into wholeness. I believe it was 2 episodes ago when I talked about this journey to wholeness, this ancient feminine journey into wholeness. And if you've been listening to the podcast, you already know that when I speak of feminine, I'm not talking about woman. And when I speak of masculine, I'm not talking about man. We all have feminine and masculine within us because that is just the essence of life, having the feminine and masculine to create life. And whether we are a man or a woman, we have these aspects within us. We all have a body, otherwise we're not human. That is the matter, right? The matter, the mata, the great mother. And this ability to connect with the body as sacred, as holy, as divine is created through our remembrance of the soul, which is the feminine itself. I'm using a lot of words because they're activating certain remembrances within your own consciousness. And I'm speaking in circles a little bit because I want you to get this in different ways. I want you to play with this in your mind. I want you to see how these land in your heart. I want you to feel a resonance or lack thereof in your body with what I'm saying. We've been so conditioned to see ourselves through our mind. And when we start to drop down into the heart and open the heart, we begin to have a very different experience of ourselves. And so just this simple attunement to the heart rather than the mind, right? What you can do in this moment, you can bring your awareness, your mind's eye, your third eye down into your heart. You can presence yourself in your heart. And you're going to have a very different experience with this conversation than you would if you were just listening with your mind. And I'm all for the mind. We need the mind. The mind gives us that observer capacity. But if we are letting the mind dictate who we are and how we act and how we speak, and we're not centering ourselves on the heart and aligning who we are with the heart and opening the heart to the self and to other, then we're still living in separation consciousness. We're still living in separation in general from others, from parts of ourselves. So just center yourself in your heart for a moment and allow your heart to expand. Because often all we have to do to open the heart is just remember it's here and come here. Presence yourself in this portal. The heart is a portal to the divine. You can access everything and anything right here in your heart, everything and anything. And a lot of times we search for answers from other people when they're right here in your heart. when we go into the body in order to access the truth of the soul, the wisdom of the soul, the divine. When the heart is open, then what is stored within comes up into our awareness, including our feelings and the emotions that have been suppressed, stagnant energy. Talk a lot about this in the Sacred Body Wisdom Foundational Series that I have, which is on sale right now. So if you go to thepathtosovereignty.com, you can check that out. And I think it's the third practice is a deep heart opening activation. It allows you to receive what is inside of you without judgment. The heart doesn't judge. The mind judges. The mind judges based on what? The mind judges because it's been told something is worthy or unworthy, good or bad, right or wrong. The mind judges based on a belief system, what it's been told, what it's seen, what others have said. Heart doesn't judge because the heart, when fully activated, is simply holding space, is simply attuned to divine love. It is all about acceptance and inclusion. Imagine if we were all walking around this planet with our hearts wide open, anchored into self. You don't want your heart wide open without it anchoring into you, because you don't want your heart going out. You want your heart going down into you so that you overflow with love and that love doesn't exclude you. But imagine if we all had really anchored hearts walking around this planet. We would not be in the separation and war and violence and, quite frankly, a lot of ego going back and forth online or going back and forth in person around the world. We would not be in that state because you cannot condemn another person from your heart. You can hold somebody accountable. You can have boundaries. You can speak your truth, but you don't condemn. Imagine how different that world would be. Now take that from the world and just imagine how different your own relationships would be. If you showed up from your heart instead of your mind, how different would that relationship be? Perhaps you'd be able to really see another having their own experience without making it mean anything about you, without judging them if they feel differently than you. Or if you were in your heart before you spoke, imagine what a different relationship you would have. Which every relationship was about both people, not one or the other. Now, imagine if every time you had sex, you were in your heart. Because sexuality, right, is so natural. And yet there's been so much shame and guilt placed upon sexuality based on this belief that the body is separate from the soul and matter is separate from spirit. And quite frankly, the belief that woman does not have a soul and is not divine. And so if you have this belief system, this innate belief system, then of course you're not going to see sex as sacred, because sex would then take you away from God instead of toward God. But imagine if you were in your heart and you recognize the God within you and you recognize the God within your partner and you communed God to God, God to Goddess. If you communed heart to heart, soul to soul, it would be a holy act, would it not? Imagine if your heart was open and anchored into your body and you were able to connect with every part of you in infinite love and acceptance. And so when somebody else tried to shame you, your own heart offered you so much love and acceptance that you didn't even let that shame in. You didn't even let that judgment in, because you weren't willing to see yourself through that person's eyes, that person's unloving eyes, because they're not on their heart when they're doing that. You were enough in your heart, and you were so self-sourced, you were sovereign enough to see yourself through your own eyes, through the eyes of your soul. And so there was a natural barrier between you and them that refused to allow in anything but love. This is what I guide my clients to do, to cultivate deep within themselves. This is how we create boundaries. It's not by having defensive mechanisms. It's not by trying to keep everything out. It's not by trying to think we're perfect. We create boundaries by anchoring into the self, anchoring into love, and not allowing anything in that isn't love, because you have cultivated that within you. You've embodied that within you. And you can recognize who you are through your own soul's eyes, and you don't see yourself through others' eyes anymore, because you are your own authority. This is what it means to embody your sacred sovereign power, which is my one-on-one transformation portal. Imagine if every desire that arose within you was brought to your heart. And so instead of just doing the things you're told to do because you're told you're supposed to want that or have that, like this kind of car, this kind of house, or this kind of job, or status, or position, or money, or right, all those things that a lot of people tend to quote desire, but are really not desires at all. They're really ways to conform, ways to get what they think they need to have to be good or valuable or worthy, because they're egoic, quote, desires. They come from a place of inner lack. They come from a place of inner need. They come from a place of grasping or reaching for something outside themselves. And true desire, on the other hand, right? Imagine if it's heart desire, it's true desire rising up within you. Imagine that's filtered through the lens of your heart, which recognizes, I am already in overflow. I am already so full. I am already so alive. I am abundance embodied. I am wealth embodied. And I just desire more out of this pure desire for life, because what is desire? Desire for life. I always laugh thinking about this, quote, spiritual notion that it is unspiritual to desire, because if you don't desire to get out of bed in the morning, what do you do? You don't desire to eat. You don't desire to create. You don't desire to connect. Then what are you doing with your life? It's pretty boring, number one. Number two, pretty sad, right? Inside, like there's an emptiness. There's no life there. I wake up every morning full of life because I've cultivated and activated my ecstatic life force energy, that sexual life force energy that is our birthright. I desire a lot, not from a place of lack, but because there's just this desire for more, desire for life, desire to experience, but it's not the kind of desire that brings you outside of oneself when it's heart-based desire. It's not the kind of desire that's ego, to have, to dominate, to possess, right? So for example, often I'll hear people say, not often, but I've heard people say that they're attracted to somebody and they kind of, quote, want them. And it's like this, I want to possess, I want to have, I want to get something. That's not really true heart desire. It's really ego. It's to have, to hold, to possess is not love. That's not connection. It's not the desire to connect with that person. It's not the desire to connect with that soul. It's not the desire to open your heart to them or for you to feel a heart-to-heart connection. It's almost like greed. It's like a taking energy, right? It's pure ego. It's separation consciousness. Now, you can be attracted to somebody and want to connect with them, or you can be attracted to somebody and want to take something from them or have them. Two very different things. One is heart, one is ego. Can you feel the difference? Desire for life, when it's activated, how do we activate that? How do we activate desire? Well, it's through the body, of course, right? Because if we're out of that lack-based, ego-based separation consciousness, then we're out of the head, which means we're in the body. Now we get out of the head by being in the body. And so we're in the body, not as an object. We're in the body, not as letting it control us. We're in the body, not as, oh, I have uncontrollable sexual urges and therefore I must do this thing that my body is telling me to do because it desires something. Now that's why Augustine basically said sex was a sin, because he had uncontrollable desires, and it must be the fault of woman who creates that desire that he cannot control, that he believed took him away from God. It's a really ridiculous theory, quite frankly, but it also makes a lot of sense based on the culture in which he was raised, that viewed women as possessions and property, that he would then think it was taking him away from God to desire a woman who was not of God, right? Separation consciousness. If he had viewed women through the lens of his heart, if he had reconnected his heart to his sexual organs, if he was no longer in separation consciousness, he would know that it was simply taking him closer to God. But it's the consciousness, the heart consciousness, that allows us to do this, to reunify sex and sacred, right? This doesn't necessarily mean it has to be I'm going to be with you the rest of my life. I can only have sex with you if I have this forever commitment. This is I see your soul, I see my soul, and I open my heart to the divine within you, to the divine within me, and we commune heart to heart, soul to soul, body to body. That's Holy Communion. But this cannot happen if you still see your body as an object, or if you still see another person's body as an object, something that you want to take or have or possess or dominate. This can only happen when you start to connect with your soul through your body, when you start to connect to your body as a temple, when you start to drop down into the body, which allows the heart to open. And in order for the body to speak to you, the heart has to be open to receive the feelings, because you feel. When your heart is open, you feel. And these feelings have to be received through the heart in order to reveal themselves, or else they're just going to fear that judgment and that condemnation and go right back down and create more stagnancy in you. Again, if you're like, how in the world do I do this? And I don't quite understand how I can cultivate this in my life, then the Sacred Body Wisdom Foundational Series will lay this out for you step by step and provide the activations and the embodiment practices and the integration so that you can know how to do this in your life. It walks you through it. And it's a very, very affordable price. So that is a resource if you don't know how to do this. The way that we activate our life force energy is by allowing the body to speak, which again requires the heart. We allow the body to speak. We allow that stored, stagnant, suppressed energy to come to the surface, and we create more space inside. And the more space inside that we create, the more room there is for the energy to move through us unimpeded, because you are an electromagnetic being and energy is constantly moving through you, whether you're aware of it or not. And so as you open more space in your body, you allow that natural pulse of life to move through you, that kundalini, right? You allow that to move through you, and you allow it to merge with the heart consciousness. You become so alive, you become so radiant, you are full of life, you are full of love, you are full of joy. This is the epitome of the sacred feminine, the goddess Venus, the goddess Aphrodite, the goddess Inanna, the goddess Isis. These are representations of the goddess for millennia, because they knew Hathor, they knew that life is love and love is life, and life is the feminine, life is the sacred feminine. When life is merged with the awareness of our divinity, it is sacred. There can be nothing but that. And so really it's that union, which is of the heart, that creates that capacity for us to experience not only sacred sexuality, but to experience our life force energy and to experience ourselves as holy, to embody our divinity, and to allow desire to be filtered through the heart to then guide everything we do, so that your life becomes this dance, this ecstatic dance. And you're not being ruled by anything outside of you, because you are allowing your heart, body, soul to show you in each and every moment your next step, your next thought, your next feeling. It's coming through you without obstruction. It's flowing through the heart consciousness that you have, that's the container to allow life to flow through you. That's how we cultivate the sacred feminine within ourselves. The body as holy, learning how to connect with it, learning how to access it. Desire as holy, learning how to filter it through the heart, learning how to let it guide you, learning how to let it move through you, working through the shame and the fear of desire and all these belief systems. That's how sexuality becomes holy, is because it becomes an act of communion with the God within self and other, heart to heart, soul to soul. As in the minutes of Inanna, it was heart to heart, eye to eye, hand to hand. That was the sacred lovemaking. That was the hieros gamos. That was the sacred union in the ancient myths of Inanna, which are 4,000 years old. Before the story of Adam and Eve was written, before we have a religion that tells us that it's all separate, or a religion that basically said that women were not divine and that the feminine was not sacred. And so in order to really come into the sacred feminine of the body and desire and sexuality, which is what the goddess has always represented, is heart consciousness. That's the key. And you can do this by coming into your heart every day, just placing your hands on your heart, breathing into your heart, letting it expand. And it requires melting the barriers that are there. It requires facing the wounds that have prevented you from both giving and receiving love. It requires spending time with and hearing the voice of your soul through your heart. And your intuition comes from your heart as well. And that will allow you to receive what is inside of you, to start to work with it more consciously, to clear the subconscious, to clear your energy body so that that life force energy fully activates. And again, this is available in the Sacred Body Wisdom Foundational Series, because it teaches you exactly how to do this. By going into the heart, there's a heart activation. There's a womb and root activation. There are teachings that help you to know how to do this, how to move the stagnant energy. And it's a Kundalini activation, because it is clearing the energy body to come into this union within, this union without. I'm going to stop there today, because as you might be able to tell, I can talk about this for days and days and days and hours and hours and hours and weeks and weeks and weeks, months and months and months. So I will see you next week on the Soul Sovereignty Sexuality Podcast. Feel free to post your comments below, like the video, subscribe to your favorite platform to make sure that you get notifications of future episodes. You can also sign up for the email, and that will send new podcast episodes to you each week. So you don't have to go searching for them on your phone or on YouTube. You'll be able to get it delivered straight to your email. Click the little button, listen. And I hope this supports you on your path to sovereignty. Sending you lots of love.